Roberto Cavalli was once one of fashion's wildest dreamers, his name a byword for excess, glamour, and fearless sensuality. His creations, drenched in animal prints, rich leathers, and unapologetic sex appeal, lit up runways and red carpets from Milan to Miami. For a time, Cavalli didn't just dress celebrities, he helped define an era. But somewhere along the way, the magic faded. The brand that once roared with confidence lost its voice in a sea of changing trends, missteps in leadership, and the brutal speed of modern fashion. Creative direction shifted. Ownership changed hands. Sales slipped. And eventually, the house that once dressed icons stood on the brink of collapse. So what happened? How did one of fashion's most flamboyant labels fall so far? And can it ever return to the spotlight it once owned? Before the name Roberto Cavalli became a shorthand for decadent glamour, it belonged to a young art student in Florence with a fascination for texture, nature, and experimentation. Born in 1940 into a family of artists, his grandfather was a renowned painter, Cavalli's creative path seemed inevitable. But it wasn't traditional artistry that called to him, it was fashion. In the late 1960s, while studying at the Academy of Fine Arts in Florence, Cavalli began experimenting with textile printing. He developed a unique technique for printing directly onto leather, a groundbreaking innovation at the time. This wasn't subtle tailoring or subdued elegance. Cavalli's vision was bold, tactile, and fearless. His prints mimicked wild animal skins, rich florals, and surreal textures, all fused into a flamboyant, sensual aesthetic that instantly stood out from the restrained minimalism that dominated the era. His big break came in the early 70s when he presented his patchwork leather designs at the Salon du Prêt-à-Porter in Paris. The fashion world took notice. Soon after, he opened his first boutique in Saint-Tropez, then a hub for the glitterati, attracting attention from Brigitte Bardot and other icons of the time. Cavalli wasn't just making clothes, he was creating a mood, a lifestyle, a fantasy of opulent rebellion. From the very beginning, Roberto Cavalli stood for something different: maximalism over minimalism, provocation over restraint, and wild elegance over polished conformity. And for a while, the world couldn't get enough. By the 1990s, Roberto Cavalli had evolved from a rebellious outsider to a full-fledged fashion star. The world was ready for his brand of flamboyant excess. As the decade embraced supermodels, celebrity culture, and flash photography, Cavalli's aesthetic was a perfect match. His runway shows became spectacles, filled with plunging necklines, exotic prints, distressed denim, and high-octane glamour. His clothes didn't whisper elegance, they screamed confidence. His signature elements, leopard and python prints, sandblasted jeans, and fitted silhouettes, quickly caught the attention of the entertainment world. Stars like Madonna, Jennifer Lopez, and Beyoncé embraced Cavalli's unapologetically sexy designs, wearing them on red carpets, in music videos, and on stage. The brand became a visual shorthand for glamour, wealth, and bold sensuality. In 1998, Roberto Cavalli launched his first men's collection and followed it with accessories, eyewear, and eventually the more youth-focused Just Cavalli line in 2000. Just Cavalli offered a slightly more affordable street-inspired version of the Cavalli DNA. Wild prints, denim, and a rock and roll attitude aimed squarely at the next generation of consumers. At the height of his influence, Cavalli wasn't just dressing celebrities. He was creating icons. Every piece radiated excess and fantasy. Fashion magazines couldn't get enough. Stylists clamored for looks, and Cavalli boutiques popped up in cities from Milan to Miami. The brand's unmistakable style had transcended clothing. It had become a cultural symbol of 2000s-era indulgence. The House of Cavalli had arrived, and it was larger than life. As the early 2000s unfolded, Roberto Cavalli was no longer just a fashion designer. He was the architect of an empire. Having conquered the runway and red carpet, the brand began expanding in every direction. Ready-to-wear collections evolved into full lifestyle offerings. eyewear, fragrances, watches, children's clothing, and home decor. Cavalli even launched Cavalli Club, a chain of high-end nightclubs and restaurants that embodied his signature aesthetic: plush, extravagant, drenched in gold and animal print. At the core of this empire was a clear message: luxury should be fun, bold, and immersive. While many luxury brands clung to exclusivity and restraint, Cavalli doubled down on fantasy and flair. His stores, much like his collections, were theatrical, spaces that transported visitors into his wild, high-octane world. Sales soared. At its peak, the Robertocavalli brand was generating hundreds of millions of euros annually. The Just Cavalli line, in particular, became a commercial success with younger audiences who couldn't afford haute couture, but still craved Cavalli's signature edge. Licensing deals flowed in from around the world, and the Cavalli name became synonymous not only with fashion, but with a jet-set, party-fueled lifestyle. But as the brand grew, and grew fast, cracks began to form beneath the glittering surface. Success had brought wealth and recognition, but it also introduced a new challenge. How do you maintain creative control when the brand becomes bigger than the man behind it? By the mid-2000s, Robertocavalli was a global powerhouse. But behind the scenes, the weight of expansion was becoming harder to carry. The brand had reached a scale that required more than just one man's vision. It needed corporate structure, capital, and strategy. And with that came compromise. In 2009, as the financial crisis rippled across the globe and luxury spending took a hit, Cavalli began exploring options to bring in external investors. Talks of IPOs swirled, but the reality was more complicated. In 2015, after years of speculation, Robertocavalli sold a 90% stake in his company to the private equity firm Clessidra SGR. The designer retained only a small share and soon after stepped down from day-to-day operations entirely. This marked a turning point, not just for Cavalli the man, but for Cavalli the brand. With the founding designer no longer at the helm, leadership passed through a revolving door of creative directors and CEOs, each with their own interpretation of what the brand should be. First came Peter Dundas, formerly of Emilio Pucci, who attempted to modernize the label with a more polished boho luxe vision. While critically appreciated, his collections never quite captured the wild Cavalli spirit or resonated with consumers. Subsequent changes in leadership only deepened the brand's identity crisis. What once felt fearless and singular now felt disjointed. The prints were still there, but the energy, the audacity, was missing. Retailers began pulling back, and consumers moved on to fresher labels that better captured the mood of the moment. Cavalli was starting to feel like a relic of a bygone era. In trying to evolve, the brand lost its edge. In trying to grow, it lost its soul. By the late 2000s and 10s, the once glittering Cavalli empire was crumbling. Years of inconsistent creative direction, shifting ownership, and declining consumer interest had taken their toll. What had once been a brand that defined red carpet glamour now struggled to define itself at all. Stores began to close, licensing deals dried up, sales plummeted. In 2019, the situation reached a breaking point. The Robertocavalli company filed for bankruptcy in the United States and entered administration in Italy. The company abruptly closed its U.S. stores, laid off staff, and halted operations. The Cavalli name, once synonymous with luxury and excess, was now associated with instability and mismanagement. Headlines weren't about the clothes. They were about court proceedings, unpaid employees, and mounting debt. Behind the scenes, chaos reigned. There were internal disputes, public exits, and failed rescue plans. The brand had lost its core audience and struggled to connect with a new generation of consumers who found its once rebellious aesthetic dated or irrelevant. In a market where streetwear was ascendant and authenticity reigned supreme, Cavalli's gilded excess felt out of sync with the times. Even the celebrity allure had faded. While newer designers like Alessandro Michele at Gucci captured the zeitgeist with irony and maximalism, Cavalli's brand of opulence felt stuck in the past, more reality TV than runway forward. It was a dramatic and humbling fall for a brand that had once redefined sexy, audacious fashion. But in fashion, endings are rarely final. And in Cavalli's case, there was still one more act waiting to unfold. Just as Roberto Cavalli seemed destined to fade into fashion history, an unexpected twist changed its trajectory. In late 2019, the brand was rescued from collapse by Hussein Sajwani, a Dubai-based billionaire and chairman of real estate group Damac Properties. Through his private investment firm, Vision Investments, Sajwani acquired Cavalli with a bold promise: to restore the brand to its former glory. The move raised eyebrows. A real estate magnate taking over a struggling Italian fashion house? But Sajwani had a clear vision. He wasn't just interested in fashion. He saw Cavalli as a global lifestyle brand that could span everything from haute couture to branded residences. It was less about clothing and more about turning Cavalli into an experience, a world. One of his first major decisions was appointing Fausto Puglisi as creative director in 2020. Known for his love of bold prints and provocative silhouettes, Puglisi was a natural fit. He wasn't trying to erase Cavalli's DNA. He wanted to revive it. His debut collections reintroduced the house's signature elements: wild animal prints, bodycon cuts, and unapologetic glamour, but with a sharper, more modern edge. Under Sajwani's ownership, the brand began rebuilding. The focus shifted back to quality design, tighter collections, and long-term strategy over quick wins. Cavalli even began exploring more experiential marketing, including new flagship concepts and exclusive events. Slowly but surely, interest returned. Retail partners took notice. Celebrities began wearing the brand again. The spark, while not yet aflame, had been reignited. But the real question remained: could Cavalli truly reclaim cultural relevance in a fashion landscape that had dramatically changed? In 2025, Roberto Cavalli stands at a crossroads. The brand is no longer in freefall, but it's also not yet fully revived. Under the creative direction of Fausto Puglisi and the financial backing of Hussein Sajwani, Cavalli has stabilized. Yet the question remains: can it truly thrive in a world that has moved on from the kind of fashion it once dominated? Puglisi's vision has been consistent: celebrate Cavalli's roots while steering it into modern relevance. His collections have re-embraced the maximalism that once defined the brand, but with a refined, almost ironic twist. There's a self-awareness now, a knowing nod to the past rather than a blind return to it. Celebrities like Kim Kardashian and Jennifer Lopez have been spotted in the brand again, signaling that Cavalli may still have red carpet power. But star endorsements are no longer enough. Today's consumers, especially Gen Z and younger millennials, demand more than glamour. They want authenticity, sustainability, and storytelling. And that's where Cavalli's biggest challenge lies. While the brand has begun re-engaging with digital platforms and experimenting with immersive retail experiences, it still lags behind competitors in areas like sustainability, transparency, and cultural relevance. Brands like Gucci and Balenciaga have mastered the art of reinvention, while newer players like Jacques Mus and Marine Serre are capturing hearts with fresh perspectives and ethical values. To succeed, Cavalli will need to do more than design beautiful clothes. It will need to stand for something meaningful. Still, there are signs of life. The brand's real estate and hospitality ventures, including luxury residences and branded resorts, suggest that Cavalli is betting on lifestyle as much as fashion. It's a bold strategy, and one that could either dilute or amplify the brand's identity, depending on how carefully it's executed.